Everybody. I'm MJ Bishop of the Corwin Center. Sorry I had to be away there for about an hour for another meeting, but I'm glad to be back joining you. And I gotta say, I am so impressed with the number of you who have hung in there today. This has been a long day, but I think it's just a testament to your commitment to your students for the fall semester, making sure you're as prepared as you can be, and your interest in exploring these adaptive technologies. So thanks to all of you for being here. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Our last session for today is with Realizeit. Our presenters are Ty Roberts, Senior Vice President of Partnerships at Realizeit. Prabhu, I'm sorry, I'm not going to get your last name.
Prabhu, that's it. Prabhu is fine. Yeah, Prabhu is fine.
Okay, and also two colleagues that we've lost our slides, so I don't have the University of Central Florida colleagues' names on my slides.
Hi, I'm Ann Prucha. And I'm Kacie Tartt.
Thank you so much. I remember your names now that you said that.
Okay.
Said them, but
hi, nice to see you.
Appreciate that. Nice to see you too. So go ahead and let you get started, Ty. Go ahead and kick it off.
Thank you, MJ. Appreciate it. And again, I know I was up. I'm in Chicago, so I was up before 7:30, getting on with everybody this morning. So I know it's been a long day. Just about time to exhale. So we'll try to make this session high energy and riveting for the end of the day. So let me just real quick kind of just set up the time we're going to spend with one another. We're going to do this in two parts. The first part is myself and my colleague Prabhu are going to do just a little setup on Realizeit, go into the system, and just kind of walk you through a couple specific examples as a student and as a faculty. Just give you an appetizer, give you a flavor for what adaptivity can look like. And then Kacie and Ann are going to kind of walk you through their story and really give you their firsthand experience. And I'll set them up in a few minutes. So this is Ty Roberts speaking, and I'm joined by Prabhu, who heads our Client Solutions team. A couple slides just to bridge to this morning. You know, you guys all have a wealth of choice. You have several choices available to you. Maybe you don't feel like you have enough, but you have choices. And, you know, not everybody needs the same thing. So again, from this morning, we'd encourage you to think about how much control is important to you, that you want to be able to really design and control how you use the system or the courseware or the technology and the content. You know, in some cases, it may be wonderful to use what's off the shelf with what you can get. In other cases, you may have a lot of original content you want to bring in, supplemental, maybe some publisher content, different things like that. So we really tend to specialize where it's more about customization and really kind of building to suit. That's really how to think about Realizeit. And as we said before, we absolutely know firsthand the constraints on faculty time. So it's really about putting in the right amount of effort. You know, obviously, you know, if you put in less, you might get less. If you put in more, you get more. But really, we take time up front to really just try to figure out what's the right amount of effort that you can put into it, and how do you maximize the results that you're going to get. And that's really a result of our onboarding process and discovery process. Again, just from this morning as a reminder, what really we thrive on is really helping tap into each individual faculty. What do they really want to do? If they could really wave a magic wand and say, I've always wanted to be able to do this or that, or I want to do less of this, I want to do more of that, we really listen to you and figure out how can we design that? How do we shape the technology? So we are a bit different. We may not be suitable for everybody, but for those that are, we really can almost kind of build a custom-made, you know, a custom fit for what you're trying to do. And as I said earlier, you know, we have a very specific methodology that we go through. Typically, it's about 8 to 12 weeks in order from start to finish, from the time we begin a discovery process to the time you're implemented. We will walk through the process every step of the way. Our faculty are highly supported, not only through implementation, but even, you know, the whole first run through a semester. so that they can decide how they may want to iterate the implementation in order to get to use the data to figure out what adjustments, what iterations do you want to make in order to continue getting the results you're looking for. And again, I know we've talked about this, and I was so appreciative to hear MJ and Karen and Barbara this morning talk about how the course design is really what's so critical to success. And for us, every engagement starts with discovery. And we'll ask so many questions, but it's just trying to understand your current situation, what works, what doesn't work, what problem are you really, really trying to solve? You know, what do you want adaptivity to do for you? In the case of Realizeit, adaptivity, there's many levels of adaptivity. And so we just want to make sure that we're bringing you exactly what you need. So this is an important part of the process, but what I want to do is kind of set up my colleague Prabhu here to kind of set up going into the system so you can see in live action, you know, a sample learning experience.
Great, thank you, Ty. So before I, take you into the system, just to, give you a context, with Realizeit, the adaptivity is serving a very specific purpose for the students and the instructors. When it comes to students, the primary purpose that adaptivity serves is to get them to complete as much as possible, get them to develop the highest possible level of mastery of the concepts, and get there with confidence, meaning student confidence. We don't want, there's a difference between crossing the finish line but still feeling good and crossing the finish line and then feeling winded. So we obviously want students to cross the finish line but feel good and confident about the journey that they took. So every adaptive learning decision that the system is taking or recommending in the adaptive learning experience is trying to balance these three aspects. Get them to complete as much as possible, get them to the highest level of mastery, and make sure that they are doing it with confidence. And when it comes to adaptive or adapting, there are multiple factors to which the algorithm is adapting to. But at a macro level, it kind of breaks down into three broad categories. The first is readiness. Is the student ready? Meaning, did they remember what they learned in the prerequisite course, or did they forget? If they forgot, how can the system then adapt to that? If they are in week 6, did they forget what they learned in week 4 or week 5? If they did, then how does the system adapt to that? So it's really readiness to where they are at that moment. That's number one. Number two is their current performance. Depending on their performance, the system is trying to say, should they move them forward to a new topic, or should they stay on the same topic and practice some more, or should they move backward and then bridge something that they forgot? So their current performance is another bucket. There are multiple factors underneath that. The third, obviously, is the student's individual preference. The student always has the agency to say, I know this is what the system is recommending that I do, but I'm going to do something else, and they can do things based on their, on their personal preference. So that's the adaptive or personalized learning experience. When it comes to adaptive teaching, the system's primary purpose is to make sure that the system provides relevant, real-time insights to the instructors. And what this does is it takes away time and guessing in terms of students' performance data from the instructors, so they are spending less time grading assignments to generate insight, but the system is generating the real-time insights from pretty much day one, week one, so that the instructors can then focus on intelligent and adaptive teaching methodologies or intelligent interventions. So that's really how the system makes adaptive teaching possible for instructors. So with that setup, let me quickly go into the system and show you a quick demo of how the system works, right? So I'm assuming you can see my screen okay. Right now, I've logged in as a student who's in the middle of learning a module called linear equations, right? So I'm in the middle. I'm not new to this. So as you can see, there are 4 individual lessons in the module. I've done 75% of that. I'm doing okay. My mastery level is competent, is not bad. And my overall module score is at 81%. And as you can see below, the 4 lessons or topics are organized in a learning map. And if I kind of zoom into the learning map, I've done a couple nodes really well. Lesson 1, lesson 2, I've done really well, green star. Lesson 4, I'm barely making it there. Lesson 3, I've not done anything, right? So this is a typical student who's somewhere in the middle of, completing a module. So what I want to kind of show you is a learning experience when it comes to how a specific lesson adapts to the student based on their performance in real time, right? So let me go into lesson 2. So this is a lesson that I've already been to, I've completed, I've done a really good job. So I'm going in for the second time, the next one more time to kind of get my learning done. So here is the learning concept. So my current performance in this lesson is at 95%. So this is math content. So I'm kind of going through the learning content here. So let me click through just to kind of go through a typical lesson. So obviously I'm fast forwarding it. The system is offering me alternative version of the content. Not at this point. Keep going. And here are interactive examples. So these are low stakes examples where it is, before graded questions are given to me, these are practice problems. So I can, get them right, get them wrong. It doesn't have a bearing on my overall performance, but I'm just gonna, try to get them right. So in this case, let's see, I've gone through my practice problems, and the next section, the knowledge check that you see on the left, right? So this is where, I'm about to go into the knowledge check. So these questions matter, how I answer them matter, right? So before I can answer these questions, I want to kind of highlight what you see on the left side. So there are 3 lesson bits. There is a learning activity, there is a practice activity, and there is a knowledge check. There are 3 bits for me as part of lesson 2. So in this case, I'm going to try to get them most of them wrong, right? So I'm going to perform pretty poorly. And then I want to show you how the system kind of adapts this lesson based on my performance, right? So I've gotten 3 questions wrong, right? And the system is also generating mathematical questions, using variables. So the person sitting right next to me may not get the same question. Even if they get the same questions, then the numbers are going to be wrong. So obviously, as you can see here, I've forgotten things. I've gone on a long weekend. I've come back from a party weekend, and I've forgotten what I've learned on Friday. So I'm obviously done poorly. So if I come back to this lesson, so as you can see, if you remember, there were 2 green nodes, and then I performed poorly on lesson 2. Because of my performance in lesson 2, the system also changed the color for lesson 1, meaning lesson 1 is a prerequisite for lesson 2. If I'm struggling this much in lesson 2, that means that I'm actually forgotten some things in lesson 1. So the system is actually saying, hey, you know what? I think you need to really go back, and practice lesson 1. So let me force myself, even though the system is recommending that I move on to lesson 3, I'm going to force myself into lesson 2 and then show you how the system, personalized the lesson for me. So now I'm in the same lesson, but if you look at the lesson path to the left, there are additional bits that have been pulled in. These are remedial content that has been presented to me because I've demonstrated that I'm struggling in this lesson. So the system doesn't throw everything at everybody. It reserves some remedial content only for the right for the right situation. So in this case, let's say I go through the remedial content. I'm going through it. Let me click through. Right, and I want to get to. So obviously, if you remember, my previous performance was at about 90% or 95%. Now it's dropped down to 53% based on my performance. So let me, instead of clicking through all of the lessons, let me just fast forward it and then go to knowledge check, right? So skip to knowledge check, right? Assume that I've gone through it, I've practiced the questions. So in this case, I'm going to try to get all of them right, as much as possible right? So let me see if I can accomplish that. My math skills are not bad with the speed with which I'm going, as you can see, right? 2 more questions and I'll be done, right? So in this case, I've kind of forced myself into the same lesson. It's given me some remedial content. It is adapted to my performance, and I've done better. So in this case, as you can see, I've done better. But if so the system is now recommending that I go to go forward, even though I could stay on the same lesson and improve. The system is saying, no, I think you should probably try some new content before you do something else over here. So that's really the learning experience of how a given lesson, based on the performance of a student, will adapt. If I need remedial content, it'll pull the remedial content just in time. If I'm doing okay, then it'll allow me to move forward. So it kind of makes the experience adaptive based on my performance, right? So that's just one example that I wanted to show you. There are other ways that the system adapts, but in the interest of time and other discussions that we wanted to hear, I'm going to pause and then switch over to the instructor experience, right? So here I've logged in as an instructor, same course, same module, same module, linear equation. So in this case, I'm managing a section of 26 students. As you can see here, the system is able to provide me with the real-time performance of how the students are performing across all of these 4 topics across my course. So I'm looking at it at a section level. 5 out of my 26 students have completed all 4 modules, which is great. Everybody else is working through them. Some of them are doing well. Some of them are not doing well. So I can look at this lesson or this module and go, where are my students performing well? Where are my students struggling? So as an instructor, you at various points in time, you would want to understand how the overall class is performing, which is this dashboard. And let's say a student is about to walk in or just walked into your office for an office hours appointment. So then at that point, you want to zoom into a specific student. So the way you would do that in the system is by clicking on the specific student. Let's say if Rachel walked in, or click on Rachel's name, and then the system, the map color changes to show the big bubble here is Rachel's performance. The small bubble on the top right corner is the class average. So you can at a glance see, as an instructor, how is Rachel performing compared to the class average. In this case, obviously, Rachel is ahead. The class average is somewhat behind. Rachel is ahead. Let me click on somebody else. David is another good example, right? So David is progressing, is working, but slightly behind the class average, right? So you can individually zoom in on specific students to understand what's going on. So that's one level of zooming in. The second level of zooming in is to say, if you want to really understand why is David struggling in this lesson 4, you can obviously zoom into that specific lesson. So you're looking at specifically the performance of David for that lesson. So you can look at the history of what David did, so how much time he spent, and maybe he just needs to spend more time, or you can look at the questions he responded to see, so you can look at the footprint or the historical signature of the student as they are doing, doing things. So as students are engaging with with the content and with the practice problems, the system is generating insights that are available to instructors in the real time. So you're not waiting for an assignment to be submitted and graded to generate the insight, which usually is a week or 2 old, because by the time grading is done, the class has moved on. So this is real-time insights that's being generated for the students. So that's the.
Speak the emojis.
Yep. Sorry. Yes. Here is another, right? So another aspect that we implemented about a year or 2 ago is the ability for students to report their emotional state. So if I'm a student over here, I've kind of switched back to the student view. So here is a student. I could report my emotional states. Let's say, for example, this is self-reported. There's no camera that's reading my face and detecting it. We're not there yet. But let's say if I'm frustrated, as an instructor, I can see who's happy, who's frustrated, and what's going on. So if you're managing a large class, we've seen evidence where an instructor, if they see a large section of students who are unhappy about something, they don't like the questions, something is off. If they pick up the phone and call a few of them and go, hey, I see you're performing poorly and you're frustrated, what's going on? And then once they make engagement or contacts with a few students, the news spreads, and then they're able to kind of make sure that the student understands that not only the instructor knows how they are performing and where they are struggling and where specifically they're struggling, they also know their emotional state to the extent that they're willing to share it or make it available. So those are multiple ways where insights are generated. Some of them are system generated, some of them are self-reported, to make it easy for the instructors to get a view of how the students are doing. So whether it is a class of 25 or 250, they're able to make a quick decision in terms of where to engage, what to help, and who needs help. Right? So that's really how teaching can be turned into adaptive teaching with powerful tools that brings real-time insights into the forefront. So that's really what I wanted to show. I mean, there's a lot more that I can show, obviously, but in the interest of time, and I'm sure you want to hear from Ann and Kacie to understand what they did and how they did with Realizeit. So I'll pause here and transfer control back to Ty.
Thank you, Prabhu. And there is so much more we would love to show, but in the interest of time, we want to give time to Ann and Kacie, because I think that they have some really important perspective to share. So Ann and Kacie are both from the Department of Modern Languages at UCF, University of Central Florida. So I'm going to turn the floor over to them, and I will advance their slides, but I'm turning it over to you guys.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all, and we are really happy to be here and have the opportunity. I know some of you, like Abina, Gretchen, and Paul, hopefully I'm not missing anyone, you had lunch with us, so you've heard a little bit of what we're going to say and seen it. But just to get started, as far as adaptive learning is concerned, as Ty mentioned before, using this system, you could really get a custom fit. And so that's what I was looking for, was freedom to get away from traditional textbook and courseware and be able to present things to my students that had real world application. You know, I always poll them at the beginning of the semester. I talk to them about their goals for the course, what they're trying to get out of their Spanish class, because this is a, you know, kind of a generated requirement for most of our College of Arts and Humanities students. And so that being said, they, you know, were telling me, this is what I want to use my Spanish for. And that always wasn't being delivered with the content in the textbook, but also the courseware that we were using. And something that wasn't one size fits all, and not just for the students. I mean, obviously our students are from really diverse backgrounds. They've all had a different experience, maybe in the language, maybe in life, but also for the instructor. What we are using, and again, I go back to that custom fit, one size fits all doesn't work for us either.
Good point. Can you go to the next slide, please? So really quickly, the project that we used adaptive learning for was a redesign that is actually coming down from our Board of Trustees, who's funding our Center for Distributed Learning to address student success, and they've decided that adaptive learning is the way to go. We redesigned elementary Spanish 1 and 2. We eliminated the traditional textbook and courseware that we've been using for decades. We were originally going to use publisher content and have the system ingest it, but the publisher whose book and courseware we were using kept dragging their feet, so we jettisoned that and we created our own scope and sequence. We created essentially an online textbook with OER content plus our own materials. Can you go to the next slide? Thanks. The reasons for the course redesign come from us, but also from our university.
Yeah, so a lot of students had prior knowledge of the subject matter in Spanish, be it because they were heritage speakers of Spanish, had taken Spanish in high school, or had simply lived in a community here in Florida where they were seeing a lot of Spanish. So that was an issue for us. We don't have a placement exam at our university for Spanish, and so that was one of the problems we were trying to solve. Online delivery mode challenges where students, you know, feel like they're in isolation, or maybe what we're presenting doesn't match exactly, again, what they're trying to learn. So we were trying to personally address that, as well as, and we've mentioned it and we'll mention again, that traditional textbook and courseware fatigue.
Our university really wants to work towards improving student success and decreasing the numbers of students who don't, you know, finish courses, either because they weren't successful and failed, they withdrew, etc. And so again, adaptive learning is what our university has decided to pursue in order to achieve this and to solve for that problem.
A lot of emphasis is being placed on getting these students out with their bachelor's degree in 4 years.
Yeah. And in addition, textbook costs are a big issue at our university. We have an affordability initiative, and our redesign luckily fell under that, and we have been given a badge for Affordability Counts, which is a Florida State University initiative, or Florida State University system initiative, and no longer do our students have to spend $275.
Yeah, our particular students pay nothing, but to get the badge, you have to, your course has to be $20 or under per credit hour.
Can you go to the next slide? Thank you.
So again, and you heard me, those of you at lunch heard me say this today, I'm never going back to a textbook. I am afforded so much freedom at this point with what I'm doing and creativity. I love to create new things for my students, again, based on feedback that they are constantly giving me, be it formal or informal feedback. And just the autonomy that I have and the ability to customize. I mean, we can say it over and over again. If there's something that I don't like about the course, I can immediately go into the system and change that and push it out to my students. If there's a suggestion they have or a question that they query for me, or have a question about why I've put this in there or why a specific answer, you know, is not available for them to answer, you know, if they say, would this be grammatically correct? I could say, absolutely, we can put another answer in and add it. And just student preference and demand. When I first started with this, I used adaptive learning just as a review for my students and kind of dipped my toe in the water. And the following semester, I didn't use it for various reasons. And students who had gone from my Spanish 1 to my Spanish 2 were asking where that adaptive learning component was.
In our experience, we found that adaptive learning, you know, not only do we have the freedom and flexibility that we haven't had before, it really allows us to focus more on teaching, mentoring our students. That is our function, that is our desire. We no longer have to deal with technical issues because of the courseware, publisher, site, etc. It's a lot of work to set something up like this, but once you put in that work at the beginning, you know, you really see afterward how you can even continue to improve it, but without spending, you know, so much time the way you do at the beginning. And no longer do we spend time trying to solve for tech problems and technical glitches that we had before with publisher courseware. So it's been wonderful. But we have preliminary data, which has really, really been great from our first semester. So if you'll go to the next slide, we'll just look at that real quickly. Student success, which is grade of A, B, or C, in our two classes, 1120 and 1121, they're the ones at the top, went up 23 and 22 points respectively. So 91% and 87% of students in these classes received a passing grade. And this is comparing the previous semester in her classes and my classes to our classes the next semester with adaptive learning. Next slide, please. Our withdrawal rates also went down as well. The negative numbers are good. And again, comparing pre-adaptive learning and then the next semester with adaptive learning. Could you go to the next slide? We also got some good feedback on our SPIs, which is a student perception of instruction, is a fancy term for evaluations. At the end of every course, students evaluate our teaching. They evaluate the course materials. And on a scale of 1 to 5, you'll see that in SPN 1121, Spanish 2, the change was plus almost half a point, which is a pretty big deal because their perception of the instruction and the materials that were used for them to achieve the goals and acquire the skills went up almost half a point, which is pretty big. And those are students that had taken Spanish 1 without adaptive learning. Then they went to a course in Spanish 2 with adaptive learning. So that half-point jump is a big deal for us, and we're really excited about it. In Spanish 1, they went up 0.14. They weren't comparing adaptive versus non-adaptive, but still it's a good number. Next slide, please. Thanks.
And now you can just kind of see where we've been, where we are, and where we're going, the number of students, you know, that this has had an impact on. In fall 2020, Ann and I are currently the only ones using adaptive learning in Spanish, but we have 2 colleagues that will be joining us in the fall for a total of 14 course sections, and the average number of students is 35 in those sections. A lot of additional languages are in development in our department using adaptive learning, so that's really exciting too, and we've been able to speak to them and just kind of talk about this journey that we've taken. I'm currently developing an upper level Spanish course using adaptive learning, and I am ingesting publisher content for that one. And so then you can just kind of see for the future what we hope to be able to do and adopt this program wide, because we see that it has been at a great benefit to our students.
Right, and I should just mention with this program-wide adoption, that is the ultimate goal. Again, this is a push that comes from our Board of Trustees to incorporate adaptive learning for these big gateway gen ed type courses. And so we feel really honored to be the people to make, to be involved in this from the ground up. And so far we're getting really good results, and we're really excited about what's to come. Next slide. Okay. So real quick, just a couple things on perspective and experience. There's many different ways you can do this. We did all OER, no textbook, no nothing. Kacie's going to ingest publisher content from a textbook for an advanced course. Some people use it, adaptive learning, for just review. Some people use it for just homework. There are many different ways you can do with it.
Some people use it for just one module,
yes,
where they see that students are having trouble with one particular concept. We would recommend that you work with someone, work with a collaborator, or with even a team to get, all of the things together that you would like to do, and just be committed to the process, because, I will say it is a lot of work, but just like Ty told us before, less time, maybe less success, but when you put the time in, it really is worth it. And students do notice the difference, and we could go on for hours anecdotally, but we want to leave time for you all to ask questions and for our co-presenters to be able to wrap up.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. And we did want to make sure we left time for questions. And we can go in any direction as well. But just, maybe a couple wrap-up thoughts here with using PowerPoint. But as we said earlier this morning, different disciplines have different amounts of choices. So, there may be some courseware choices that you have, when you're looking at chemistry, or you're looking at algebra or calculus. But there are an awful lot of disciplines where there really aren't too many choices, and there's not ready-made courseware in engineering or computer science, or maybe in languages. And so, realize that, what we've built ourselves up to is to be versatile. So it was intentional today that Prabhu showed a STEM example in algebra, linear equations, and then, we invited Ann and Kacie here, who are talking about a non-STEM, language arts. But what we know from all of our years of experience is that where there's a natural structure to the learning, it lends itself very organically to where adaptive learning can be useful. So again, realize it. There are a lot of different disciplines. We work in all of these disciplines, and happy to talk with anybody that may be looking for different options. This is the time we'll take questions. Prabhu can bring the system back up again to show faculty view or student view if anybody had any questions there. I'm putting contact information up in case you'd like to reach out to Ann or Kacie directly, or to myself for Realizeit. So we are open to questions. And
so Ty, there was one question in the chat that came to me privately, I think by mistake, about cost to students. Can you clarify what the costs are to students, and if there are no costs to students, what is the business model?
Yeah, well, the Realizeit model it's a subscription-based, usage-based model. So it's per student, and our standard pricing is $30 per course taker per student enrollment. Now, we have different customers that implement that very differently. In some cases, the university pays that cost, and there is no technology fee to the student, incremental. In other cases, some institutions pass that on to the individual student. And depending on the nature of the content that is part of it, there could be additional cost to cover the content cost. If it's OpenStax or Lumen or publisher content, there can be an added cost. But just the technology platform itself and putting the entire experience together, that's $30. And who pays is really the institution's policy.
So it's $30 per student per course.
Yeah, for the technology.
Got it.
The platform.
Are there other questions?
Just one question I have. This is Dr. Sahu from Coppin State University. So when you say for technology, that means the book is set up, material is set up in a, for example, Blackboard.
No, the content is actually in Realizeit. So I was just referring is if you were using a publisher content and it costs $20 per student for the use of their content, then that $20 is in addition to the $30 with Realizeit. But the content would be put inside Realizeit and manipulated in order to drive the adaptivity. But in the case of Kacie and Ann, for example, they're using original content. It's a $30 fee, and the institution's paying it. So it's there is a tech fee the students pay, but otherwise there's no incremental cost to the student. So it just depends on what content you're using.
Okay, thank you.
That help? Great.
And Dr. Sahu, you brought up Blackboard. Just to kind of extend that thought a little bit. So typically our implementations include where after the implementation in Realizeit, the adaptive learning modules or assignments are linked into your LMS through LTI. So as students complete the adaptive learning modules in Realizeit, whether it is homework or class prep, usually as on due date, the module score will be sent back to your LMS gradebook. So usually Realizeit becomes the activities in Realizeit becomes a graded activity for students, so that way there's an incentive for them to engage. So that integrates with whatever LMS that you may have. So the grades and the access can seamlessly flow through from Realizeit back to the LMS.
Can I ask just follow-up question? How does this faculty training piece works in terms of being able to check or give the tech help to the student and tech help to the faculty? Because the courses I have in my mind are taught same course by, say, like seven or eight teachers.
Yeah, there's no incremental fee whatsoever, Dr. Sua, for teacher support. So that wouldn't change. In fact, there's no licensing cost for instructional designers, for faculty, for administrators. There are no fees for that whatsoever, and they would all receive the same support during the implementation from our team. In fact, we can even set it up. We've got implementations where one course has 11 instructors, 11 different instructors teaching 1,200 students. And each one can actually make some modifications to their unique implementation. That's the power, of Realizeit, is being able to tailor it to suit each instructor and make it work exactly the way you're thinking of it.
Very good. Just the last question. My questions never ends. We use Blackboard, and they are set up for quality meta standards, and I am assuming that your material which you are provide service for are seamlessly integrated to the learning management system.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Are there additional questions? Yes, Daniel Moorhead asked, will we receive all the PowerPoints presented today for further evaluation? Absolutely. Obviously, you have the contact information for the Realizeit folks. You've seen that also for the other suppliers that we've heard from today. And of course, also, if you're interested, please also reach out to CAI for the Kerwin Center for Academic Innovation at usmd.edu. And we'd be happy to answer more questions and connect you with the right folks. Just a couple of quick thoughts about that, and we will be asking the providers to let us know if you reach out to them directly as well. We're interested to monitor interest. We're curious to see where there are going to be pockets of uptake in the adaptive tools, and hopefully if there are ways that we can support your work, we will try to do so, whether it's through USM On Track to be able to subsidize some of the costs. No promises there, but that may be a possibility. Certainly for us to facilitate interinstitutional learning communities, professional communities of practice for the faculty that are engaging with these tools, so that you can learn from each other, much like you've learned from our faculty colleagues throughout the day today. So we're going to be working at trying to create this as a somewhat coordinated effort. So you'll be hearing a lot more from us. You'll hear from us tomorrow morning, or maybe even later today, with some follow-up about today's events, and to gauge interest to see how we might be able to support your efforts moving forward and toward the fall semester.
MJ, can I add a comment while we still have a few minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Just some, there's so many things that we would like to share that, you don't have time for all of it. But I do, obviously what I've heard today, there's a lot of OER going on, right, within the Maryland system, unquestionably. And one of the things that Realizeit really likes working with is original content and OER content, because it really gives you a vehicle to put it into and make it work for you and customize it in that way. Another thing too, for some of you all may teach 30, 40, 50 students per cohort. We do have instructors that teach. We have one instructor that has 1,200 students in biology in a semester. Another one's got 300. Another one's got 500. And they are some of our best success stories, because they use this system and they're able to use those dashboards and use those emojis and things in a way because they've lost contact time. And it's a way to kind of gain back some of that connection and interactivity with their students. And they manage it by groups, they manage it by those that are at different categories of competence and so forth. So just something also for if there's folks in the audience, who are thinking, gosh, I've got a couple hundred students in my class, how do I manage that? That's a big part of this, is making it easier for the instructor to manage that kind of scope. So I just wanted to put that.
And that way, thank you for that, Ty, because that actually was part, as we were back in March, everybody was closing up and we were, faced with emergency remote teaching. And I was trying to figure out what we could do out of the Kerwin Center to support faculty. One of the things that occurred to me almost right away was that, there are some tools available that can really actually support, particularly these high enrollment courses with, by building back in some of the data that faculty are missing as a result of having to move online to the extent this has been online education. So I think you're absolutely right about that. I think also absolutely true, and I think you and I share the same vision with respect to the ways in which the platforms interact with the OER to provide us with the mechanism to make the OER even better, or to make it context relevant, or to make it culturally responsive for our learners, because we're able to see through the data what's working and what's not working for our students, and then make adjustments in a platform like Realizeit accordingly. So very exciting times, as you look at, what's possible with openly licensed materials and the ways in which we as faculty can interact with them in much the same way we interact with our research and our scholarship. I think there's just loads of potential here for, down the road. Understanding, of course, everybody's pretty swamped right now.
Well, I know we're wrapping up and we're at time. I absolutely want to make sure I thank Ann and Kacie for willing to participate today. I know they were in the brown bag lunch as well. So thank you to you, Ann and Kacie, and thank you, MJ, and your whole team for the invitation and for the really nice event that you led today. So
thank you all so much for joining us. Let's give them a big round of applause. And our thanks for zooming in from Central Florida. Stay healthy down there amid all of the craziness. And we'll look forward to following up with everybody. And good luck with your fall semesters. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Feel free to get in touch with us as well. We're happy to continue the conversation.
Great. Thank you both.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, MJ.
You're welcome. Thank you all for hanging in there all day long.